What's up, Barnhill family, and welcome back to your home for all things combat sports.
Yo.
Guys, we got a great midweek episode coming your way today. Nassourdine Imavov giving us a hot interview in which he said he's going to be fighting for the title in the fall. We'll break that down. A couple of boxing topics. Canelo and Alex Pereira going back and forth. I know Nick has some hot takes on that one. Ryan Garcia and Conor Benn in a heated exchange. We'll break that down and some of the things that were said. John Pork, or Chunko, as he's correctly known as, is getting a massive pop from the crowd. We'll debate whether or not he's a future star and why it's taken so long for him to get his first fight in the UFC. And of course, we will wrap today breaking down and predicting the main event this weekend, Bogdan versus Magomed. But Nick, let's start with Nassourdine Imavov, because that to me is the most interesting and the most relevant thing, seeing as DDP just got a big win last weekend. And Nassourdine, for some time now, has been in a lot of people's mind the number one contender to fight for the belt.
Right.
Now, Sean Strickland, and he even mentioned this in the interview, he said Sean came out and put on a fantastic performance against Hernandez. We know that the UFC is prioritizing finishes. He got a really nice one in Houston.
Yep.
And, him and Khamzat have drama. And so it makes sense. Okay, he got the title shot. That's not the most interesting thing in the interview to me. What's interesting to me is that he said to the interviewers, when I realized that was all kind of transpiring, I said, great, well, give me DDP when he returns, because he's got to be coming back soon. And he said that Sean Shelby told him, no, we're going to hold off. You don't need to fight DDP. We don't want you just taking a random fight or a number one contenders match. You are the number one contender. Hold tight, and you're going to get your opportunity in the fall. And he says either October or November. Now, October is typically the Abu Dhabi card. Islam Makhachev typically headlines that one. He won't be this year because he's obviously headlining the next numbered event happening in August. So Islam will not do a 2-month turnaround.
Right.
So that does leave a headliner for the main event. And we know Magomed Ankalaev is fighting this weekend. So some people thought maybe he's going to come back and contend for the light heavyweight belt. So there is a need for, a Muslim fighter or a fighter from the Middle East to be high up on that bill or, potentially the main event. So Sean Strickland said he's never leaving or fighting outside of the United States again.
Right.
But the more interesting thing to me is that it seems like Nassourdine is ultra confident that he's getting, based on this interview at least, that he's getting the next title shot. And Khamzat Chimaev is saying, it's a rematch or bust for me. I'm not going to 205 right now. I'm not fighting a number one contender. I want Sean Strickland, and I want him in Abu Dhabi. What do you make of Nassourdine's candid interview?
Well, hearing from Nassourdine was actually nice. And, he was speaking in French, but they had the translation. So I was able to pretty much understand what he was saying. And I hope he does get the next title shot. Sean Strickland has a win over him, but what he's done since that loss deserves a title shot. And it feels like to me, after we saw Khamzat wrap the belt around Sean, even sealed it with a kiss on his forehead, that the beef was squashed. So everybody would be wanting to see another fight between Khamzat and Sean if they didn't squash their beef. And Sean apologized and said, look, I was just trying to sell the fight. We fabricated this whole thing. I don't dislike Khamzat. And so now to try to recreate that magic is a little bit difficult for me. And also, I think the fight was fun. I think it was pretty close. But Sean did enough to prove to me that even if Khamzat gets a rematch, an immediate rematch that is, he will likely not be able to beat Strickland. So I think that the ability for Sean Strickland to prevent the chokes from happening in the first round and then really change Khamzat's fight style for the rest of the fight was eye-opening, because Sean didn't look to stop the takedowns. Nobody can stop Khamzat from taking him down. He was focused on all of his energy going towards stopping the submissions. And that was a brilliant game plan. Obviously the first round, we saw Khamzat get him to the ground, hold him there, and then look to get a hold of his neck, right? He wanted to strangle Strickland. But Strickland had two hands on one. Everybody knows, especially with MMA gloves, if you can get two hands on one, especially the choking hand, usually you can prevent a submission. And that first round didn't have a whole lot of activity. It had a lot of ground time. But I think after that, it made it much more difficult for Khamzat to get the fight to the ground. That's why we primarily saw a striking match, and for the most part, a boxing match, right? Sean wasn't even looking to throw very many kicks. So I think Nasserdine stepping in instead of Khamzat is the better choice. I think Khamzat can find his way back to a title shot. I don't think there's that many people in the world that can beat him at 185 or at 205. Personally, I would rather see him go to 205 because I think there's some fun matchups for him there. And with Strickland at the helm and Dricus being there, it just sort of feels like we've seen a lot of these matches. Hell, Strickland and Nasserdine even have a match. So 185 has this round robin where everybody's fought everybody, and it sort of feels like now we're just going to be doing reruns regardless of who gets title shots and who becomes number one contenders. But if Nasserdine and Sean is made, or soon to be announced at some point before 2026 is over, what does that do with Khamzat? If he's not willing to take a title shot, we know that the UFC doesn't really like people that refuse to stay active and wait around for title shots. The sport moves very quickly. A lot of times people get passed up in those situations. And while Khamzat obviously is one of the best fighters in the world, I don't know if waiting around is the right move for him. I think he may have to jump back in line. But again, Dricus is the guy who it would make the most sense to fight. And we don't really want to see that fight either. I think for the most part, Dricus versus Khamzat was a one and done. We don't really need to see them go at it again. I also think that Dricus is a pretty good star. You know, he's in South Africa, which is a region that the UFC's been trying to grow for a meaningful period of time. So to see him get held down for another 25 minutes by Khamzat isn't exactly good for the division. I think Khamzat should go to 205. I think if him and Nassourdine are brothers, he should be very happy for his brother and Imavov for getting the title shot. Maybe he can avenge the loss for Khamzat. But then what do we have there? If Khamzat's saying, I'm waiting around for a title shot and Imavov wins, but we found out a year ago you guys weren't going to fight each other because you're brothers. Now what are we doing? Now you've sort of forced Khamzat's hand into going to 205 or becoming a contender at 185, which he's clearly said is not something he's interested in.
Yeah. Just kind of unpacking everything that's happening, including and like looking at it through the lens of what Nassourdine Imavov said. Number one, I do think Nassardine's the rightful guy.
Me too.
I have concerns about Khamzat at 185. And I'm not like horribly upset if Khamzat gets a rematch. That was a close fight. Yeah. And Khamzat's a really good fighter. Like, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Khamzat Chimaev couldn't come back and beat Sean Strickland, but let's look at just a few facts. Khamzat does pull out of fights.
Yeah.
He does have issues making weight. He's got issues with cardio and, the things that are associated with what now is kind of a big weight cut for him in 185. He used to go to 170, but it seems that 185 is a hard weight cut for him. And I just keep coming back to what Khamzat said before the fight with Strickland even happened. He said, this is it. I was already on my way to 205.
Yeah.
They asked me to come back because they felt like the beef was there. This was a big fight. I came back down and said, look, this is one and done. I'm going to come back and do it once. I'm going to beat Sean Strickland, and then I'm going up to 205. And now the tune has changed because of what happened in the fight.
Right.
So let's say you book Sean versus
Imavov?
No, versus Khamzat.
Okay.
Is the rematch. I guess you could do, when you talk about the round robin, you talk about DDP's fought Sean twice, DDP's fought Khamzat once, Sean's fought Khamzat once. So, the only two people that are really odd man out would be DDP versus Nassourdine, which that fight makes sense. But now Nassardine's telling us in the interview that Sean Shelby is telling him, no, we don't want you fighting DDP. The only thing that makes sense to me, though, is if you are going to do Sean versus Khamzat, I think we all have to be honest with ourselves and say there is a chance that Khamzat pulls out of that fight or doesn't make weight or something like that.
Sure.
You have to make the co-main event DDP versus Nassourdine.
Yeah.
And then if something happens, you can insert either one, probably Nassourdine, but hell, DDP's got 2 wins over Sean. So
right.
Who knows? 185 is a weird place, but I think it's going to get shaken out. But I think Khamzat's best home is at 205. But to me, and I want to move on to the next topic because it's not necessarily about Khamzat and DDP. It's more of a candid, like behind the curtain conversation that Imavov had, and he's dead confident that he's getting the next title shot. Now, is Sean making good on his word that he's not going to Abu Dhabi to fight anytime soon?
I believe so.
And if he is, and Nassourdine said it's either October or November, November's typically Madison Square Garden.
Right.
So that would mean that Sean versus Nassourdine would take place in Madison Square Garden, and then you still have a void to fill for the for the Abu Dhabi card that typically happens in October. Now, we don't have these dates announced yet. I'm just going off of what's happened the past couple of years.
Yeah, and it's hard to say because most of the biggest names that we have would be the ones that would headline Madison Square Garden. But we've got Islam Makhachev fighting next month, right? Ilia Topuria is a big name, but I don't predict that he'll be fighting before this year's over. You just start to look at the schedule of what we do have and what we've recently seen, and it feels like 185 could for sure be the main event of that Madison Square Garden, especially if Sean is true about not wanting to fight anywhere but the United States. And then if you have Sean versus Khamzat in New York City, the last one was in New Jersey, so we're basically just recreating the exact same fight.
Yeah.
I'm not of the mindset that Khamzat can't make 185. I think he was actually prepping his body to go to 205, and then they called him and had him switch, but he was already, extending his calorie intake significantly and trying to build his frame up to the 205, and then all of a sudden he had to put the brakes on that and start cutting weight immediately. Now, I get that he is a naturally bigger guy for 185. I mean, he didn't look like a small guy, but if Dricus can make 185, Khamzat should be able to make 185. Hell, even Strickland. Strickland looked pretty big in there against Khamzat. So I think Nasserdine obviously does deserve the shot. And I think if the UFC is telling him that, then we've basically got all the information we need to know who the next title shot is. And it makes the most sense if Sean Strickland doesn't want to go to the Middle East and fight and defend his belt, that they would do it in Madison Square Garden. So I have no issues with that. But I also really wouldn't be that upset if Khamzat did get the opportunity. I mean, he is a big star. And the UFC being a business and understanding what kind of business Sean versus Khamzat #1 did, they might be trying to squeeze the juice out of that lemon just one more time. Imavov is a very good fighter.
But can you fabricate the beef again when they both came out and said it was like, we just put on a show for you guys?
Right.
Like, if you're going to do the rematch, then save that little bit until after the rematch is over with.
Right, and that's the thing. Most people, if we would have just been unaware and out of the knowing of that beef being somewhat fabricated, or if Khamzat would have stormed out of the cage instead of wrapped the belt on Sean, maybe we could believe, okay, we got to see this one again. The beef is not settled. But it felt to me like, all right, Sean did enough to get on with the division and move on to the next meaningful opponent, which would be Nasserdine. And also Nasserdine has been waiting for a meaningful period of time because Khamzat and him were probably should have fought when Khamzat had the belt, but they weren't willing to do that. So you just got to move on with the division. I'm not mad at either fight, but I do think Imavov deserves the shot at Sean, and I think that's the better route for the UFC to go.
Agreed. Let's move on to Magomed Zaynukov.
Oh, John Pork.
Quick break in the action, guys, to thank today's sponsor, Kalshi, the predictions markets where you can trade on real-world events, including MMA fights. And what Nick and I love most about Kalshi is that the lines move based on what you guys, the fans and the experts, think is going to happen, and they're not affected by online bookies. And as a special thank you to the Barnhill Brothers listeners, Kalshi is giving you $20 to predict with once you download the app, use the promo code Barnhill, and deposit $20 of your own. So if you think you know MMA ball, stop talking about it and put a little skin in the game with Kalshi. Thanks so much to them for being today's sponsor. Back to the video. Chunko, John Pork, he's lovingly referred, it's kind of one of those weird things, right? Because he's lovingly referred to as John Pork. People don't mean any offense by that, but he actually hates that
Takes
nickname
offense,
because he's of Islamic faith, and so he doesn't consume pork. But either way, Chunko, I will call him by the name that he prefers.
Yeah.
Chunko is seemingly getting a massive pop in Abu Dhabi right now. Now, obviously you would expect that from the region, but there's a lot of fighters from that region and Muslim fighters on the card, and they're not getting that same pop that Chunko is getting.
Right.
Magomed seems to be a pretty big star in the making. 8-0, broke a record for lightweight significance. Had that fight actually happened in the UFC and not on Dana White Contender Series, it would have been a record for the most significant strikes landed in a 3-round fight. This guy's an output machine. He's a lot of fun. The UFC has him as the feature bout, so you got to think they're expecting big things out of this young man. The question is, how high do you think his ceiling is? What are you expecting out of him in his first fight? And do you think that the Dylan Dennis scuffle had anything to do with why it's been almost a year since that Dana White Contender Series fight and we have yet to see him actually take his first UFC fight.
Yeah, this fight week is interesting because Chunko is actually coming in, getting all the praise right on the media stuff, and seems to be a very fan favorite guy even before the fight has gone down. And obviously he had a banger of a fight on the Contender Series. So what I'm starting to see, and this is maybe recency bias in my head, Tommy McMillan stole the show in OKC, right? And he wasn't on the main event or co-main event. He was on the main card, but Chunko is kind of like the Middle Eastern version of Tommy McMillan, right?
Yeah.
Because, he has this crazy volume style, really entertaining on the Contender Series. Now, Tommy McMillan just had one of the performances of the year, broke a record in his own right for most strikes landed. So there's a lot of similarities between John Pork, or Chunko, and Tommy McMillan, just as far as what the fans are expecting, how the fans are reacting to him, and then, of course, the volume and exciting fight style. So I'm interested to see how he takes the ball and runs with it, because we saw a home run out of what Tommy Gunn did this past weekend. And also you can tell by the media people, I look at us and several other journalists and people. Ariel Helwani had Tommy on the show. Chael Sonnen's making videos about him. Brennan Schaub was talking about him. Everybody is talking about Tommy McMillan. So John Pork, Chunko, also has that same opportunity to go out there and really steal all the headlines away from a fight night. And this is not the craziest card, right? I mean, Ankalaev was supposed to fight Khalil Roundtree, right?
Yeah.
And he had to pull out. So now you insert Bogdan Guskov, which, tough dude, but we all expect Ankalaev to come out of that one relatively unscathed and should get his hand raised in that. So then you start to look down the list, and there's not that many big names, right? Steve Urseg's a great fighter. We like to watch him fight. But there's a real opportunity for Chunko to do exactly what Tommy McMillan did on this OKC card last week, which is just steal the show. He's already got the attention of all the fans. So I would assume at the weigh-ins or the press conference, whatever they do this fight week, he is going to be able to really get the crowd behind him. I like him. I think his fight style is really good. I hear a lot of really impressive things coming out of the gym. They say he's super legit. So I can't wait to see him finally get his UFC career going. And it feels like this is a perfect place for him to do it over there in the Middle East.
So I think that his future is great.
Right.
He's obviously got extremely high level grappling, but when you couple that with absolute lightning on the feet,
Volume.
good Muay Thai, good volume, good hands, I think that this guy is going to be somebody to watch. Now, I think the UFC, once you roll him out, you roll him out in Abu Dhabi, he goes, I mean, there's another Abu Dhabi. We just talked about it with the potential of the October card.
Right.
I say if he gets out there and he gets a big win, you keep those train wheels turning, and you put him back on that October card and you get him going. Now, I don't want to get too ahead of myself because he has an undefeated prospect in front of him, but the young man has never fought at the level. I've looked at his record. I think WOW Promotion was the last fight that he got a win on before he got called up to the UFC, and he's only 24 years old in Damian Respecki. But everything is kind of laid out for Chunko to hand him his first loss,
right,
and then kind of have his coming out party in the UFC. So I'm actually pretty excited for this fight.
Me too.
Moneyball and I will break that down in detail. Guys, by the way, Thursday, Moneyball MMA and I do a full live stream so you can interact with us in real time. Live stream breakdown. We start on the early prelims and go all the way to the main event. We make our predictions. We talk each fight through, and then each of us make a prediction at the end. So come and check that out on tomorrow, Thursday evening at 7 p.m. Central. So that'll be out tomorrow. We'll do more on that fight as well as all the others on the card. But let's move into a little bit of boxing now.
Okay.
A couple of things. So Ryan Garcia, Conor Benn, heated exchange.
Yep.
I'm really excited for this fight. I think this is going to be one of the biggest boxing fights of the year. Conor Benn coming off of a big win against Regis Prograis.
Yep.
Ryan Garcia, now the WBC champion of the world. He's coming out. What's so interesting to me is that Ryan has said in a couple of interviews that there's a loose affiliation with Oscar De La Hoya and Golden Boy Promotions, but he has Ryan Garcia Promotions. And so Ryan Garcia Promotions in conjunction with Golden Boy Promotions, and Conor Benn is over at Zuffa, and Turki Al-Sheikh is involved through Ring Magazine. The boxing gives me a headache in that regard.
Yes.
I'll be totally honest. Sometimes it's hard to keep up with which promoting is doing what. But the bottom line is, in some small way, Dana White and Oscar De La Hoya are promoting the same fight, which is hilarious. Zuffa is going to be involved in a major way in potentially the biggest boxing fight of the year. So there's a lot of stuff to unpack here. The beef seems to be real between Conor and Ryan. I love that there's two young, talented, good fighters that are going to fight each other in their primes. And I think if there's anything here, story-wise, Turki Al-Sheikh and Dana White with Zuffa is trying to make the best fights happen when they need to happen, not 4 or 5 years removed. So your thoughts on the interview and then Dana and Oscar working together?
Yeah, Ryan Garcia and Conor Benn on the Ring Magazine YouTube page. I guess that's where they did the sit down and square off, which I love. I think we need more of that. I'd even like to see a little bit of that come into the UFC because that's pretty exciting. And while both of them were happy to talk a little smack to one another, neither one actually got out of their chair and made me feel uncomfortable for watching the interview. So I think if you got some MMA guys in there, you'd actually get even better content. But yeah, Dana White and Oscar De La Hoya having to work together or be cordial towards one another for the sake of their fighters is going to be interesting because Ryan Garcia says that, Golden Boy isn't exactly tied into this on a major level. But of course, we know Oscar De La Hoya is going to be there every step of the way. And Conor Benn is very famous now by most people in the world because of the deal that he did with Dana White and Zuffa Boxing to get that Regis Prograis fight. He made a whole boatload of money. So it feels interesting that this one is happening on Paramount Plus because that tells me it favors a little bit towards the Zuffa side, that those might be the majority promoters on this situation. So yeah, I can't wait to see. I hope Dana and Oscar don't overshadow these guys because Conor Benn, he's sharp on the mic. He looks like he looks like a high-level athlete, right?
Yeah.
He looks like somebody you could see on a Forbes list eventually.
He looks like a footballer.
Yeah, he does. Yeah. And Ryan Garcia, we know him. He's a fighter to the core. And even though he's a pretty boy, he can fight. And he's been fighting his whole life. And a lot of people thought when he was first coming up, he's sponsored by Gymshark and he's fast with his hands, but he can't box. He's just going to be one of these pretty boys that gets exposed.
He's a manufactured, clout chasing Instagram kid that can box. So no, he's a world-class boxer.
Yeah, no, Ryan Garcia is very good. It speaks to the volume of how good Tank is because Ryan Garcia has his way with pretty much everybody that he fights, and Tank was able to do what he did. So this one's interesting to me because Tank is the smaller guy than Ryan Garcia, right? And we saw him beat Ryan Garcia. Now, Ryan Garcia is the smaller guy than Conor Benn. Conor's got to come down from 160 to 147. And the last one with Regis was 149, so they had to give him a couple grace pounds. I don't know how the weight cut's going to go. I know that Ryan Garcia is a smart guy. He likes to think about all aspects of the fight, and he was very quick to bring up the weight of Conor Benn and said, you're too big. The weight cut's going to be too much for you. And Conor Benn was open. He said, I weigh about 180, and I can get down to 147. It's not going to be easy, but I can do it. That's a very normal weight cut in MMA. But for boxing, it's about twice as much as most guys in that weight class range really cut. Most of the time you'll see guys cut a good 15, 20 pounds and kind of call it, not 180 to 147. So go ahead.
Yeah, but I was just going to say Conor Benn has now the added benefit of being able to utilize the UFC PI.
Sure.
Right, because, and I'm sure Dana White would invite Ryan Garcia in to use the PI as well if he wanted to, but I think a lot of boxers are leaning on some of the sciences and technologies that the MMA guys are doing these days. You're seeing, when you went to the PI, you saw Gervonta Davis there. There's a lot of guys that are athletes outside of MMA that are utilizing that facility to their benefit. And if he's signed to Zuffa, you can imagine that he's probably meeting with their dietitians, getting physical therapy from their physical therapist, recovery. The UFC famously has the sauna, hot tub, cold plunge, and everybody kind of sits and cuts weight together and to some degree. So I think that Conor Benn's weight cut before the Zuffa days would have been harder than it will be come this fight with Ryan Garcia. So I think that is something to factor in. I don't think we're going to see Conor Benn miss weight or have to give up some of his purse because he can't make 147.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think the only thing I would have added into Ryan Garcia's antics on that Ring Magazine interview is I would have said, if you don't make 147 on the dot, I'm going to call the fight. I'm not taking it, because then that puts added pressure on Conor Benn, right?
Yeah.
You got to be the one that makes the weight. And look, a lot of times we see guys, even at this high of a level, if it looks like it's too big of a weight cut. They maybe want to renegotiate or change things around. Ryan Garcia is like, nah, I'm not playing that game. 147 it is or nothing because the belt's on the line. So I'm interested to see how the smaller guy in Ryan Garcia deals with the bigger guy in Conor Benn. Obviously, Conor's going to come in with a little bit more power, or at least the mind would tell you that. But Ryan Garcia is a power puncher. He's got the best lead hook in boxing, in my opinion. Just beautiful, so fast, and he does seem to have a lot of pop on it. But he's also a speed fighter. He loves to utilize the entire ring, and he's got good footwork. He's also down to stand in the pocket and sort of wait and bait you into stuff so he can counter. He's very cerebral, very smart fighter, and a guy like Conor Benn, who's going to be a little bit slower than him, may walk into some really good traps by Ryan Garcia and end up getting cracked. Also, with the extra weight being cut, that could make him less durable, more susceptible to being dropped, more susceptible to being knocked out. And Ryan Garcia is calling it. He was like, I don't take much time. I don't have feeler rounds in the beginning of boxing matches. I get in there and get active and try to get people out as quick as possible. So within 5 rounds, you're going to be unconscious. And Conor Benn said, all right, I'll one-up you. Let's just stand in the center of the ring as soon as the fight starts and duke it out. You know, I think he said, what did he say? Have a quick draw match. He said something like that. And just, it was a shootout. Let's have a shootout. I love that. How cool would that be if this major boxing event's going to happen on Paramount Plus? We got all the big players involved. Imagine if they both just stood on whatever it is, the Modelo sign in the middle, the Zuffa sign, the Monster Energy can if you're a UFC
whatever
fan.
The heck it's going to be.
Whatever's in the middle, just stand there, stand your ground, and have an all-around shootout. Maybe it'll last 1 round, maybe it'll last 2. For me, that could really push this into being like the most exciting or wildest boxing event of the entire year. I can't wait to see how it unfolds. I think they got the right 2 guys as far as garnering attention and getting more eyes on pure boxing, right? Obviously, we have these misfits boxing and we have celebrity boxing to a degree, but and even crossover, right? We have the MMA guys fighting boxing guys, but this is
Rico Verhoeven and Usyk,
right? And those have been the ones that are taking over boxing and having bigger draws and bigger numbers and crazier outcomes than a lot of just pure boxing events. But Ryan Garcia versus Conor Benn is a pure boxing event at the highest level, and I do think that whoever wins this is going to blast up even higher into superstardom. In America, Ryan Garcia is much bigger than Conor Benn, but from what I understand, Conor Benn, with the legacy of his dad being a legendary fighter out of the UK, is also a very big name across the pond. So I'm interested to see who is able to make the other one quit, because something tells me this one's not going to go to the judges. I don't even think it's going to get to the halfway point of round 6. I think somebody's getting knocked out early.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's going to be a finish in this one. Now, are they going to stand in the middle of the cage, Max Holloway style, and throw down, or not cage, boxing ring? So you could tell we're an MMA channel.
Yeah.
No, they're not going to do that. These guys are smart fighters, but are they going to get after it from the beginning? I think so. I think this fight's going to be exciting from round 1, which is, it's hard to say about a lot of boxing matches because they typically don't get exciting till about round 4. This will not be the case there.
Well, and Conor Benn came out against Regis Prograis very fast. He's a fast starter, just like Ryan Garcia. He likes to get in there and immediately start landing his strikes. And he is a bit of a bulldozer, right? He's a pressure forward fighter. I think he's very good with pressure. Sometimes he leaves himself open. Regis Prograis, a good friend of ours, a friend of the channel. He's been on the show. He's a great fighter. He's a little bit older by the time he got the Conor Benn fight, but even he was able to land some pretty good stuff on Conor. And it's not because Conor's just, not a good boxer, because he's a great boxer, but he does run into trouble sometimes. And I worry that Ryan Garcia's lead hook is going to be something he runs into multiple times in that fight. Not willing to make my prediction yet. I'm going to go back, watch all the most recent fights from both men before we do an official breakdown and a prediction on that fight. But I'm excited. And as it sits right now, I'm leaning a little bit towards Ryan Garcia.
Yeah, maybe we'll do a live, either live reaction to the fight as it's happening or a live post-fight recap as we've been doing.
By the way, it's on UFC Noche, same day. So if you're a fan of UFC and you're a fan of boxing, be sure you're tuned into UFC Noche, which is going to be starting early, and then follow that by the Zuffa boxing event on Paramount. So we got a full day of combat sports promoted by Dana White, and hopefully nothing pops off between Dana and Oscar De La Hoya, but at the same time, a viral moment by those two guys is nothing new to us.
For sure. So another piece of boxing chatter that's happening, it happened from Canelo. He attacked Alex Pereira for some odd reason. And I've seen a couple of posts back and forth between these two, and Canelo basically said MMA fighters are, just clunky. They're not sharp. They're not technical. And that's why the more difficult sport is the one that I do. And if you brought even somebody like Alex Pereira into the boxing ring with me, he wouldn't even last 3 rounds. He wouldn't even last 9 full minutes. Now, Pereira came back and said, look, you have a very limited set of skills, and you basically take 90% of my skills off the table and say you can beat me. I don't even think you could beat me if you take 90% of the skills off the table. But, come to my world and we'll see what happens. And like, to some degree, I'm kind of over all of it. Like, boxing and MMA are different sports. Like, I'm tired of boxers. MMA fighters make big money in boxing. There's more. It's no secret that the biggest paydays, if you look at paydays across the board, MMA probably does better. But the people at the top 1% of boxers and the top 1% of MMA fighters, the boxers make more. That's not a secret. Everybody knows that. So if an MMA guy like Ilia Topuria, Conor McGregor, Sean O'Malley, Alex Pereira, Anderson Silva, these strikers that become big stars, they all start to talk about boxing matches because there's big fights there. And usually they go over and they get worked over, which is kind of expected. But what bothers me is that it's a lot of confidence has been given to boxers because of that, but none of them are signing on the dotted line aside from James Toney, and we all know what happened there, to come over and do MMA. And I get Canelo's 100% right. He's a better boxer than Alex Pereira.
Right.
Is he going to take Alex Pereira out of the fight in less than 3 rounds? Absolutely not. Not only would he not do that, I don't think he could beat Alex Pereira in a boxing match. Alex Pereira is an enormous human being. He just fought at 251 pounds. I think the highest Canelo's ever fought was light heavyweight, which is 175 pounds.
And these are in recent years, and he's been having trouble with the bigger fellas.
And he was undersized in that fight, so...
Canelo's my height, and I'm 5'8" for anybody watching.
Yeah, no, there's 0% chance that Canelo's taken Alex Pereira out of a boxing fight in 3 rounds. And I think the chance is actually higher that Alex Pereira would knock out Canelo than the other way around.
Yeah, Canelo Alvarez just sounds stupid making these remarks about MMA. Look, boxers are better at boxing. MMA fighters are better at MMA. But don't say that these guys are just unintelligent brawlers that don't know how to use their hands. Because if you got into an octagon or even just went to a practice mat at an MMA gym, you would find out very quickly that you're just a guy that only knows how to use his hands. Imagine somebody starts chopping Canelo in the legs. Imagine they start kicking him in the liver. Imagine some knees as soon as he starts to dip. He's really good with slipping and moving and rolling under punches. Okay, roll real deep like that and let somebody who knows how to throw a knee, land that flush on your face.
The roll's not there as much as you thought it was.
No, you got to be very structured with how the range that you fight in, how deep you want to roll under punches, because now you're worried about things coming from the bottom. And also, if you don't like the way things are coming up from the bottom and you start to stand with maybe a little bit more weight in the back, stand up, sturdy, straight up type of stance, now people will shoot in and take you down. And you don't want to look like a fish out of water. Go on the ground with anybody. You could even get on the ground with an amateur MMA fighter, and they will manhandle Canelo Alvarez on the ground. So I understand getting after it with MMA guys and boxers crossing over to talk a little smack. I'm all for that. And I love when 2 guys can get into business together and make some sort of a cool one-off event. Rico Verhoeven and Usyk, that was a lot of fun to watch. It was interesting too, because we didn't think he would have near the success that he had. But you can never just, down talk somebody without having any opinion on the other way around. If Canelo Alvarez would have said, man, Alex Pereira wouldn't last 3 rounds with me, but make no mistake, guys, I wouldn't last 3 minutes with him, then everybody would go, oh, that's a nice tweet. It's good to hear Canelo at least admit the truth. But instead, he's going with this whole thing of like, yeah, I'm a 5'8", 170-pound guy, and I'd knock out the 6'4", 250-pound heavyweight striking and kickboxing world champion of MMA and Alex Pereira. Like, it just sounds a little bit silly and a little bit stupid. Also, Canelo is not the guy that he used to be. He's getting older. He's not having the same success that he used to have because he's going up in weight. And while Alex Pereira may not be as good as Bivol, he may not be as good as some of the other guys that
Terrence Crawford, but
Terrence Crawford,
he's certainly way bigger.
Yeah, he's certainly way bigger, and you got to be careful when you come in into range with him. But I just think it's interesting when Canelo is going to come out and talk smack about guys and then have no interest in fighting them or even going to train with them. That's what I love about Main Street. You know, the gym is just full of great boxers and great MMA guys. And one thing that all the boxers show is tons of respect to the MMA guys. And of course, the MMA guys show nothing but respect to the boxers. But the coolest part is we all train together. There's rounds where I'll jump in with Regis Prograis, right? And then we got Oshaki Foster jumping in with some of the MMA guys. We got Austin No Doubt Trout. He fought Canelo Alvarez. Now he's doing his thing in bare knuckle. And he'll say, hey, let's get some rounds, you know, in the MMA on the MMA mats. And that to me is the coolest aspect of crossing over between boxing and MMA, because you'll never hear a bad word come out of a boxer's mouth at our gym, and you'll never hear a bad word come out of an MMA fighter's mouth at our gym about the boxers. So I think that boxers just live in their own little bubble, their own gym that doesn't have any sort of grappling in it, and they truly don't understand. I mean, just go look at the Adrian Broner clip about him with Arman Sarukian, and if I were to shoot in on you, what are you going to do? Bop, bop, bop. I'm going to punch you in the back of the head. Well, that's not a boxing technique. That's actually illegal.
That's
one
street fighting technique. And also good luck generating power when somebody's got one leg lifted off the ground. Everybody's like, oh, back of the head shots will take somebody out. Yeah, they will if somebody's planted and they're transferring weight and they're throwing to the back of your head. Not if you're being taken. That just highlights that old saying, you don't know what you don't know. And I don't even necessarily blame Canelo so much. He's just so far removed from the MMA world. He's down there with the Reynoso brothers, and they train hard. They box. And they live within their framework, which I have no problem with. The only thing I have a problem with is when you start to say MMA guys are untechnical, they're clunky. I would get Alex Pereira out of a boxing match in 3 rounds. Then you cross over into sounding foolish. You know, Mexico's becoming a hotbed for MMA. Diego Lopez trains down there. There's a PI in Mexico City. You can go. You're royalty in Mexico, bro. Go anywhere. Go to any of those gyms, and you don't have to take a fight. We're not asking you to get in there and fight Diego Lopez. We all know what would happen. But go put some shins on, throw a gummy in your mouth, and put some MMA gloves on, and do 2 or 3 rounds with Diego Lopez.
Right.
And you would have an appreciation. And Ryan Garcia, who we just talked about in the last bit, said, you know, I went and trained with some wrestlers and some jiu-jitsu guys. I want no part of that. I realize how bad I am there. Mm-hmm. Those guys exposed me. I'm good with my hands, and that's what I do, and I respect that out of Ryan, because Ryan's like, bring Ilia Topuria in the boxing ring with me. I'll clean him up. Yeah, but make no mistake, I don't want to mess with those grapplers in their world. Right, and that's the piece of this puzzle here that Canelo, who I love as a boxer, but I don't love his antics these days when it comes to MMA fighters and what he has to say about them, is, you know, he just doesn't know what he doesn't know. Yeah, and Canelo calling out Alex Pereira is just bizarre to me, because Alex Pereira is actually one of the better strikers that the UFC's seen in a meaningful period of time, maybe ever. But let's forget about him, because he's 100 pounds bigger than Canelo and, you know, punches way harder. Let's talk about Khabib, one of the worst strikers to ever become champion in the UFC. If you had an MMA match between Khabib and Canelo Alvarez, it would be a one-sided ass whooping to the highest level, and Khabib may not ever land a single punch on Canelo. It's just a different range. It's a different set of skills. And, you know, we never really see MMA guys disrespect boxers the way we see boxers disrespect MMA guys. MMA guys are only talking about boxers because of the payday. And it's not that these boxers are just the biggest superstars in the world. None of them are as big a stars as Conor McGregor, but MMA has a different paying model than boxing. And newsflash, the boxing pay model has been favored for the boxers long before most of these guys that are competing right now were even alive. So even if the boxing model was the exact same as the UFC and it was an equal sport, right, where both guys are getting paid around the same thing, I still think that all of these boxers would be professional boxers. And then if they didn't have that leg to stand on of, well, we make way more money, then what are we talking about? Because now you're looking at it from a lens of the financial gain exclusively, which, yes, everybody is a prize fighter, whether you're in MMA, Muay Thai, kickboxing, pure boxing, whatever it is. You are in the business of fighting for the biggest prizes possible. And lucky for boxers, the groundwork was laid long before they were even alive and competing.
for the boxer to get paid significantly more out of the pot than what the UFC fighters are getting paid out of the entire pot that the MMA space brings. Now, whether that's right or wrong, I don't, that's a topic for a different conversation. I think MMA fighters should be paid more. I think maybe some boxers should be paid a little bit less. But at the same time, I just think that if we're going to keep doing these, back and forth online, one of these boxers should step into the octagon and really see what it's all about, so we can show the fans, we can show the boxing fans and the MMA fans that, yes, anytime an MMA fighter goes over to boxing, they're going to get cleaned up. But just as quick as they get cleaned up, or even faster, if a boxer comes over to MMA, they're going to be used as a mop to clean up the entire canvas.
Yeah, Francis Ngannou gave Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua opportunities in the boxing ring, and he lost both of those fights. One was controversial, one wasn't. One of those gentlemen should step into MVP's next main event. I'd much rather see that than Robelis to Spain. But let's move back into what we do best, which is talk MMA.
That's right.
Big fight this weekend. Bogdan Guskov versus Magomed Ankalaev. Now, Bogdan is a pretty big underdog, just about a 19% chance to win on Kalshi. Magomed Ankalaev, big favorite, but he was also supposed to fight Khalil Roundtree. Khalil had some injuries he had to pull out. Bogdan's coming in short notice. I kind of feel like there's some undervalue happening here with Bogdan. He's and I know Magomed should be the favorite, but Bogdan is very powerful. He's got nothing to lose. He's taken a short notice fight against a former champion. He's going to be compensated well for it, for doing such. And I think that, 4.5 to 1 favorite for Magomed might be a little bit generous, even though I'm probably going to pick him to win the fight. What say you?
Magomed Ankalaev should definitely win this fight. And I do see that the odds are pretty skewed in his favor, but you never know. With 205 and the guys with a lot of power in that division, they can throw a single shot that can change a fight. Now, I don't predict for you that Magomed Ankalaev is going to go out there and get into a fire exchange. That's never been his move. He wins a lot of fights by finish, mostly with his hands, but he takes a couple rounds to figure his opponent out. And when he doesn't get his opponent out of there, he's very comfortable with going to a decision, and usually it's a lopsided score in favor of him. So I think that Bogdan is obviously fighting with zero pressure. He's not supposed to beat the former champion. And, Ankalaev is the kind of guy where now that Pereira is out of the division, it seems like there's a real case to be made where he could be the best 205er on the planet. We got Carlos Ulberg sitting in the title shot right now, but he's out for a little while. I think Ankalaev would like to get back to that title. The way he lost to Pereira was something unique. Pereira went out there and didn't have a cage match with him. He wasn't looking to mix the martial arts. He was looking to get into a fist fight with Ankalaev, put him on his back foot from early, was able to land some of that big power. Like we said, 205ers, they can land a single shot and change things. Pereira did exactly that. Didn't give Ankalaev enough time to get comfortable, get into his rhythm, get into his groove, and find his shots. And that's probably the best game plan that Bogdan can have going into this. I don't think he should go out there on short notice and try to win a decision in 5 rounds against the former champion. I think he's got to go out there and risk it for the biscuit, go for an early KO. If he does that, shoot, he's jumping all the way up into the top 2, top 3.
Yeah, he's in the discussion for a title fight if you beat Magomed.
Exactly. So I think that I'm a little bummed that Khalil Roundtree had to pull out of this fight, because I know he was training with Sam Calvita, Arman Saruki, and Khamzat Chimaev. They'd all been getting rounds together at Jackson's studio, and they've been working together. It looked to me like Khalil was in the best shape of his career, or at least the most recent times of his career. But Sam Calvita is also getting a little bit of pushback because of the way he's training his guys, and some people say he's overtraining his guys, making them do things that maybe don't apply perfectly to MMA. I'm not a sports nutrition guy. I'm not a cardiovascular instructor or doctor. So what he's doing with the triathlons and the crazy bikes and the crazy workouts at the garage, it seems like it can work, but we haven't seen a total lineup of pure success. So I was interested to see how Khalil would do after a camp there, because I think if Khamzat would have done that camp there, he did it with Strickland and lost his fight. If Khalil came out and lost his fight with Ankalaev, then people would be laying even more into the training lab and even more into Sam Calvita, saying, see, he's overtraining these guys. I don't know if the injury happened at the garage or happened from the training. I'll have to find out about what actually went wrong with Khalil. But then you've got Arman Saruki, and if he loses his next one, then even though the training lab is maybe one of the most cutting edge gyms in the entire MMA space, they could be getting a lot of pushback, and maybe people would redirect their fight camps and their sports and strength and conditioning to a different place if they see consistent losing. So we're not going to be able to test that theory exactly, but I think that Bogdan stepping in is just one of those situations where they pretty much have everybody already booked at the top of 205. That's why they're pulling from about rank 7.
They pulled Bogdan from the fight. I think it's next weekend it was happening.
Yeah.
He was supposed to... Was it Jan Blachowicz he was supposed to fight again?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, because he had the majority draw against Jan.
Yeah.
And I believe it was the rematch. They pulled him from that fight and then, booked him as the main event when Khalil pulled out.
Yeah, so I guess it's not a full-blown short notice fight, but it is. When you're dealing with a former world champion and now you're switching the date and you're
to a different former world champion.
Yeah, exactly. It's and a more recent one. So I think it's a little bit different. Also, Jan and Ank's styles are totally different from one another. So he really does need to either change new training partners out and get himself lined up for an Ankalaev style fight. But I think he's got a real good opportunity to shock the world. But if he beats Ankalaev, it would be exactly that, him shocking the world. I don't see it happening. I think watch the first couple rounds and really see if those lines on call sheet start to switch over, because I think he's got enough power and he's decent enough at finding his targets to land a big shot or two. But Ankalaev doesn't play that game of I'll let you control some of the fight, I'll control some of the fight. He's very good at sticking and moving, staying behind his jab. He loves to fight out of that southpaw stance. He's really good there and usually has an easy time staying on that outside foot, controlling the positional battle that happens in the open stance. So I think Bogdan is obviously up against it, but I think this is an interesting fight and probably the best match that they could have given Ankalaev given the landscape of 205 right now.
Yeah, Bogdan Guskov I think has the power advantage, but that's about it.
Yeah.
I think he hits, I think one punch KO shot favors Bogdan.
Yeah.
I think striking technique as a whole favors Magomed. I think variation in striking skills that he has under his tool belt as far as kicks, body work, combinations, all favor Magomed Ankalaev. Obviously, I think the clinch and the grappling, stand-up grappling favors Magomed, and of course, the grappling that happens on the ground also would favor Magomed Ankalaev as well. I will go more in depth tomorrow for the live stream when we do our predictions, guys. Make sure you come back for that live stream with Moneyball. Tomorrow we'll be breaking down and predicting every fight on the card, as I said earlier. But just to give you my early prediction, Magomed Ankalaev by decision.
Okay.
I don't think he's going to take a lot of risks with Bogdan because he wasn't training for him.
Right.
Bogdan is powerful, 15 knockouts and 18 wins. We know how he likes to win fights. He likes to separate people from consciousness. So Magomed, as I said, very, short notice. You don't have a lot of time to think about Bogdan, to watch his tape. So I think he's going to err on the side of caution. So I like method of victory being decision. Magomed Ankalaev by decision is my pick in this one.
Yeah, I think that's a good pick. And I think Magomed Ankalaev still believes he's the best light heavyweight in the world, especially because Alex Pereira is no longer a light heavyweight. I think
he may be.
Yeah, and of course, Olberg has the belt right now, but hopefully if Ankalaev can win the fight, we can maybe see a fight between him and Olberg down the road sometime in 2027. That would be a fun one to see. But I think that Ankalaev is going to try to make a statement here. I don't know if he's going to go for the gusto and try to get a KO against a KO artist, but I think he will look for ways to staple himself as that top reigning contender right now and sort of show people that, yeah, even though I don't have the belt, I didn't lose it to a guy who's currently in the division, so I'm not really being held up or stalemated to wait around for the division to move on. Carlos Olberg has the belt when he's ready. I want to have a shot at that opportunity. So I think Ankalaev gets this fight done. I'm going to go mid to late finish TKO. He's not really much of a submission guy. He does, even though he comes from Dagestan, he doesn't really take the fights to the ground very often. I think he's going to do enough volume and damage early in the fight to set up Bogdan for a bigger shot later in the fight, and I think he gets him out of there. But the stock is going to go up on Bogdan Guskov because you take a fight on short notice. That bodes well in the UFC's eyes, and also the fans like to see people who are just down for whatever. I think he's going to come out of this with a little bit more steam behind him than he currently has.
I agree. Guys, thanks so much for watching this episode. Make sure, as I said before, come back tomorrow, Thursday, 7 p.m. Central for the live stream predictions, every single fight on the UFC Abu Dhabi card. And then Nick and I will also be doing an immediate recap. So as soon as the card wraps, let's say about 10 to 15 minutes after the winner of the main event is interviewed in the octagon, we will go live with an immediate reaction. Those have been really good. We've been getting 2, 3, even almost 400 people in the last one. The conversations are great. We engage with the chat as much as we can in there. So make sure you come back from that. And until then, have a wonderful day.
Peace.